Ta-da!
Perfect.
So you're the voice of God, but we don't get to see you. Is that right?
I think so. And I think if I want it on, it can go on. If I want it on,
Fabulous.
And then if I want to go off, thank you so much, Kiri.
No worries.
I just can't seem to, when I look at the chat, if someone accidentally puts something in the chat, I can't seem to be able to paste a question.
Maybe I do a test now and
That would be amazing. Just
yeah.
Thank you. Because I can see that, but I think I have to copy. And then when I go into Q&A, I can't put anything in Q&A. I think the Q&A is only for the registered, as in, can you guys put anything in the Q&A? I don't think so.
No.
No,
Yeah.
you can't.
I think it's only for those registered as attendees rather than panelists or hosts.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe if Rachel says, please use Q&A. I mean, if it happens, it happens. I'm just not sure how I can relay it. And how do we know when people have logged in? Will we see?
Okay, so at the moment you haven't gone live yet, is that correct?
I've never gone live, actually. It's always just launching it early and then people have come in.
Okay, so we should be cautious to be quiet when we start to see participants coming in. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see participants. So at the moment, we just have panelists,
yes.
and there are 0 participants. But when we see participants start to come in, we'll need to be quiet.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Kadanak, and I'm chair of PRHK and also head up Fleischmann Hillard in Greater China. Many thanks to all of you for joining this PRHK webinar today. As most of you know, PRHK exists to advocate on behalf of our members to promote the PR profession in Hong Kong and ensure that our clients and the wider industry are presented with best practice work and are continually challenged to see communications as one of the most strategic tools they have to grow and protect their business. This webinar is focused on 2021 trends, and we held a similar webinar this time last year, and who would have thought at that time the year would turn out as it did? Certainly, COVID-19 has challenged the PR industry, but it has also shone a light on the value that creative communications based on deep consumer insights can provide in times of transformational change. To give their perspective on the year ahead, we have 7 agency leaders who will discuss what they see are the most important trends of 2021. And I'm going to start with Kiri Sinclair. Creativity is important, but it's going to need brave clients. Can you explain what you mean by this and any predictions on which sectors are going to take up your challenge in 2021?
Hi, Rachel, and to the board and to everyone who's joined us here today. It's exciting to be here. So 2021 trends and looking at creativity as a driving force for our industry moving forward. And I think that with what we've experienced over the last year, it really is time for creativity to shine within the PR sector. So by brave leadership, what do I mean? I mean leaders enabling marketing and communications teams to do things differently. Not to just do what we've always done in the past, what worked before isn't necessarily going to work anymore. And I think that we have to take into mind that with budgets slashed, brands really need to get imaginative and they need to find new ways to connect with genuine understanding with the new emotions and behaviors that our audiences are experiencing. We've all been through something, and brands can take their time to acknowledge that. Companies can feel that emotion within what they're doing. And I think this means that we need new messaging and positioning for many brands to make them relevant in today's kind of new normal, shall we say.
Yes.
I think it's a time for more integration in communications. And I think creativity comes into how do we integrate our communications, really creating a fully integrated PR dynamic across the board, removing silos, getting rid of those divisions. And just one other thing to think about is I think creativity can come in many forms when it comes to PR and communications. So looking at new types of content, new formats, new platforms. You know, we're looking into video, live streaming, different ways to present content and to engage with people. And with that, also, I think a new localized focus to that creative content, really engaging with local markets, because each of us are on a different COVID timeline, a different wave hits at a different time. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of global brand communications that are no longer sparking any energy in local markets because they have no meaning in local markets anymore, because we're all have different feelings at different times. So I'll just conclude by saying to this question and answering your question there, how can we think differently? We've got the traditional calendar, dates all out of the windows, things have changed. So instead of communications being focused on those calendar dates, we need to also think about creative campaigns in our own time, launched at the right moment, ready to go when perhaps in Hong Kong wave 4 has passed us by and we're back to a more open market. But remember, at that moment in time, everyone's going to go out to market. So how do we creatively think about how to do that differently? And Rachel, you asked what sectors do we think would be prepared for creativity now? And I truly think we can learn a lot from hospitality and tourism brands, where they're engaging with travelers who can't even visit them. And the creativity and energy coming from them is very inspiring for all of us. I think property brands, they've really segmented and moved into more sustainability focused messaging, ESG values over sales tactics. That's very enlightening to see. And I'm some of our colleagues here on the board will be talking about trends in those areas in a second. And one thing I've really personally seen, which is connected with me, is fashion and beauty brands that have focused more on well-being and inner beauty over being pretty, which is the old messaging that they had for many years. So I think it's really a chance for PR agencies to lead their clients into the brave new world, where creativity is the focus and the first thought over the channel, over everything else. Bring that creativity first and bring out some new energy into all of what we do.
Thanks very much, Kiri. Ben, you've heard Kiri talk about the new energy that companies should be bringing to their marketing and their communications. But what about their corporate responsibilities? What should they be doing that they're really taking these seriously despite the economic situation? Fleischmann Hillard, for example, did a global survey last year that revealed 91% of consumers said it was important for companies to show that they're committed to doing the right thing. Do you think this is compatible with a creative approach? Do you think consumers have the same attitudes in Hong Kong?
Yes, I mean, fundamentally, yes. I mean, I think people are people, no matter where you go in the world, and we will see and continue to see consumers making active buying decisions based on the values which they have. And you will see creative responses by brands in order to be able to sort of fit in with sort of some of those trends which are taking place. I mean, a really good example of a brand in Hong Kong over the past year that did really well was HKTV Mall, where when we were faced with the mask shortage at the beginning of last year, and they went out and procured a machine and started producing masks. And that really sort of tapped into a need which was coming from the Hong Kong people, and demonstrated that they were tapping into those trends and looking at a creative way of how they might be able to respond to them. But I think what we're going to start seeing through the course of this year is something which I confess, I expected to happen last year. I thought last year, when we saw the rise of this pandemic, we were going to see sort of corporate responsibility, corporate purpose really come to the fore. And actually what we really saw last year was sort of a year of coping. We're just going to get through this and all the rest of it. And actually what we're now going to see as we move into 2021 is probably the financial realism of the past year. And indeed in Hong Kong, you know, we've had a challenging couple of years, I think it's reasonable to say. And we're going to see the financial impacts of that starting to come to the fore, because, you know, there is, you know, the government doesn't have the funding now in order to be able to provide those support schemes which they previously did. And I think consumers I think the responsibility is going to start moving down in terms of consumers are going to look to brands and look to organizations in terms of how they respond to it. And we saw, for example, the two largest recipients of the job support scheme in Hong Kong were the supermarket groups, which is, they're perfectly entitled to do so, and they're perfectly entitled to have taken. But that comes with responsibility, and that is going to come with responsibility for every single organization that sits in here in Hong Kong. So, you know, in terms of, if you've taken such funding, you need to demonstrate that you're looking to the long term, you're continuing to support those jobs, you're continuing to stand on the side of Hong Kong consumers, making sure that their cost of living isn't going to rise, and so on and so forth. And, you know, where brands get that wrong, you can start to see, and I'm going to give a non-UK example here. But if you take the example of Topshop, and very close to me where I'm sat right now, there was a huge Topshop on the corner of Pottinger Street and Queen's Road, which is now no longer there. And there were lots of issues which existed with that organisation. But one of them, and certainly in terms of the UK context, was that Philip Green, the leader of that organisation, had become so toxic that people were making active decisions not to purchase through that group. And you know, that sort of sense of reputation is going to become more important, and brands need to recognize that they need to look to the values which they put forward, and look to their responsibility to the consumer. And they also need to sort of slightly look back at the history which we saw pre-pandemic and certainly pre-July 1st. We know that Hong Kong consumers will make active decisions based on the values of those organizations. And we saw it all the way through the protest, where people were making decisions about yellow or blue, and were making decisions along those sort of basis. We're moving into a more complicated environment now, and we're moving into one whereby, you know, people are going to be looking at how they're treating their fellow citizens, and are they following those values? And it's going to become increasingly important as people move through this year to really understand what their buying communities want from them, understand the values which they stand for, and actively stand beside those if they're to continue to succeed. Because there are plenty, if there's one thing we know about Hong Kong, this is an innovation-driven economy, and there are other companies out there who will come in and prove that they're willing to stand on the side of those values or views which people want to see honoured within their groups.
Thank you, Ben. Anushka, Ben mentioned a couple of things. One, he gave the Topshop example where, you know, the reputation is so easily damaged through certain actions of the CEO. So he also talked about Hong Kong being a very complex place. Now, as your research shows, trust is a very fragile thing, and it's never been more critical for brands to earn it by articulating their purpose and creating differentiation. You also say they need to stand up and be counted and act on issues. But as Ben has said, it's a very complex environment in Hong Kong. What issues are important for brands to have a say on in Hong Kong? And what are some of the inherent challenges in doing this?
Thanks, Rachel, and hello, everybody. So I guess I'll just take a step back. So Edelman has been running our Trust Barometer for 21 years. We've just released latest set of global data, and people have unsurprisingly really sort of massively lost trust in all institutions. So we measure business, government, NGOs and the media, and business is now the only trusted institution. So actually, from a business perspective, from a brand perspective, we have a real opportunity because consumers trust us, whereas they don't trust other institutions. And people trust their employer. So 76% of people say that they trust their employer. So as an employer brand, you have a real duty of care to your employees. They trust you, they believe what you say. And I think sort of really carrying on the theme of what both Kiri and Ben have been saying, people are much more fearful today. They're concerned about their family's health, what the future holds, their children's education, particularly now, schools shut, mental health, climate change. They have really big concerns, and it's really shifting their buying criteria. They want business to put consumer safety first. And they want the brands that they buy to care more about people than profit. So trust has become like a super important buying criteria. So when you ask people why they choose to buy a certain product or service, first is value for money, second is quality, and third is trust. So I think this is a really important thing for us to be considering as we look to build our brands and retain or acquire new customers in this year. So you asked what issues should we be addressing, and it's not that simple because obviously there's lots of issues that people care about and they want brands to help with. So there's the personal challenges. A lot of people want brands to help with personal challenges. So give them more information about COVID, make it easier to work from home, think about employee training programs. But also want business and brands to support their communities. So, are you donating supplies to hospitals, celebrating diversity and inclusion, looking at better ways to educate children? Economic challenges, again, is a huge issue. So can you help protect the financial security of your employees? Can you be offering discounted or even free products? Health and safety, unsurprisingly, is a huge topic. So are you going to be ensuring your employees have got free access to vaccines? Are you considering mask wearing, social distancing? So all of that is all pretty heavy stuff. But then people also want levity from brands, and that moments of joy. So how are you keeping me entertained? How are you celebrating those magical moments with me? So I think building trust is what you do, and it's also what you say. I think a lot of companies, a lot of brands are doing great things, but they don't necessarily talk about it. So it's really important, particularly in a world where there's so much information around us, to be communicating what we're doing and doing what we're communicating, and just recognizing that values have shifted. Sort of adapting within that. So kind of which issues to pick in Hong Kong, I think that it comes down to really looking deep into the equity of your brand, of your corporate brand or your product brand, and just understanding what it is that you stand for and where you can make a difference, and then really understanding your target audience. So researching and understanding what they care about, what's important to them, and then finding something in the middle that you can work with.
We've talked a lot about shifting values and shifting need, if you like, for creativity. But in terms of how we actually do PR, and Felix, I want to turn the question over to you. How has the way that we're dealing with media changed as a result of COVID? And what of these changes will continue into the future? We're all hopeful of a vaccine and a sort of return to life as it was before, but will life actually turn to as it was before in terms of how we deal with media, or has that changed irrevocably?
I think in the changes in dealing with the media, you'll be in twofold. One is right now we are all online. Well, we don't have a lot of occasion that we can have a physical contact with the media. That means you need to develop your relationship and contact over email, WhatsApp, whatever. That is a not easy thing to do because media receive tons of those messages every day. But this is another story. One thing about is about last year, media definitely it's not in a good year. A lot of media have job cuts, and also they change their nature. You see in a lot of the local media, they change from traditional like print media to online version. So at the end of the day, what we need to do, I mean, this is PR need to take a more proactive role. We need to do more research, and it's time for us to review and update the database, because a lot of media changed their job or lost their job. And even all those media, what they require from PR, no matter the content, the story will be different, because now it's in online. So I think it's a time for us to think about what we can provide to the media. So it's time for us to develop more tailor-made storyline, or perhaps with the help of some agents, we need to update our database. Right? So that's for example, my company. Now we try to develop a new database because of the changes of the landscape in the new media. So I think this is what we need to do in the early of this year, because you can see a lot of changes will continue in this year. So if you don't take action now, or once later in this year, when you go through your media list, you say, hey, those people are not there, or the way you contact them, the way the story you provide them will be more difficult, because take for example the language you use right now. Well, we used to have a press release, right? But now, perhaps beside press release, you need to think about some news angle, some photos from infographic, how the media to provide more interesting story. That's, I think, what the most important challenge for PR to deal with the media in this year.
Okay. Continuing on with the whole transformation theme, David, a brave new world beckons, and there's no doubt that data and analytics are important and that AI is transforming our clients' business. But how is it going to transform PR? Felix has talked about media, and that's one area that it could transform. And do you think the industry is really doing enough in Hong Kong to drive that transformation and to take advantage of it, in fact?
Oh, hi, Rachel. Yeah. Well, actually, it's not really in our interest to do transformation, because ultimately AI will put us all out of a job as workers. So I'm very, cautious about these things, because I do a lot of writing on data and big data and analytics on the client side, and I know it's impacting their business quite a lot. So, if you're in a marketing manager on the client side, you can actually get a lot of data from raw information, and then use that to construct campaigns. So I know on the client side it's impacting things a lot, big data and analytics. The other area, media, I know the media is starting to experiment with big data and also artificial intelligence. I think there was a story back in September in The Guardian in the UK, and the title of it was, should humans be afraid of machines and artificial intelligence? And it was quite a good story. But right at the end, there was a kicker. The story was actually written by a machine. So it shows you that stories are being written in the media by machines, and how it works. Generally, a journalist will start it off with a headline and then write the first paragraph and then feed that into the machine. The machine's actually called GP3, and it will just go off and write the story. So if that's happening in the media, obviously the media is going to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of us in PR. I just wonder how it will impact us at some point. Maybe not this year, but it's definitely coming. And then if I look at my own job, I do a lot of writing and editing, especially like Chinese language material, and just tidying up the English so it reads properly in English. So I do think AI is coming into PR. As to how far it goes and how big it will impact, I don't know, but it could put a lot of us out of a job, certainly in Hong Kong. So I'm very wary of it and its impacts on the business. If it comes this year, it comes, but maybe it's next year. But it's coming, definitely. That's my view.
So Sim, just a quick question on that. Do you think AI is going to put us out of a job? And, AI is also driving digitization of social commerce, which is, you know, helping not only transform retailers, but other businesses as well. So should we be helping with this transformation? Should we be a barrier to it? Should we, you know, be all seeing that this is the way things are going and embrace it, and adopt it as fast as we can, so we're ahead of the curve and helping companies with transformation rather than hindering?
Yeah, quite a few questions packaged up in there.
Yeah.
So let's take the first one. Is AI totally going to do us out of a job? No, I think it's going to actually change the jobs we do, and I think that's the fundamental point. Maybe we'll look back in 10 years' time and said, you know, that message really did lead us down a path of false sense of security. But I think from where we're at right now, you know, we're going to be changing. The jobs we're going to be doing are changing. Yes, some things can be automated. But I mean, one of the realities is that I think all of us as communicators and marketers have actually realized over the past 10 to 15 years is the number of channels we're actually all responsible for is now diversifying hugely. And if we can automate some of those channels, then that's great. But, you know, to David's example just there, it actually takes a human engine, a human brain to actually kick off that great story that David actually read. And I think there's going to be, you know, the role of ourselves as communicators is going to be there. Kiri started off the conversation today talking about the increasing importance of creativity in today's world as well too. Sure, maybe artificial intelligence can help with that, but it's going to really take ourselves as planners and managers to be able to shape and put guardrails around that process to make sure we're actually representing the brands in the right way, and they're not taking on a life of their own. So I think there's another thing that really has been come to bear over the past 12 months is, you know, is how arguably closer entwined with technology our lives have actually become due to the deprivations that the coronavirus has actually imposed on us. Here in Hong Kong, we've been relatively lucky in the fact that our so-called lockdown is certainly lockdown light compared to many other countries around the world that people and consumers have had to endure. But even in our lockdown light version, you know, we can see, for example, in the areas of retail and commerce, that the adoption rates of e-commerce, for example, have really accelerated. Hong Kong TV Mall, which Ben mentioned earlier on, had one of its best years ever last year. And the consumer base which are using these platforms continues to expand. You know, before there was a relatively narrow demographic that was using it. But now there was what used to be called back in the day the silver surfers, the sort of the over 50s are now adopting e-commerce. And these are things that are never going to leave. They're never going to leave us. Consumer behavior has fundamentally changed because through repeated trial and testing, that people are becoming habitualized to e-commerce platforms. And sort of one of my sort of viewpoints on 2021 is what we call the sort of development of social commerce. And you can look at this in two ways. You know, there's always a million data points that you can look to about the acceleration in e-commerce. And you know, China is a great hotbed for this phenomenon, as we're all familiar with. I mean, some of the latest data came out just this week. WeChat was celebrating its 10th anniversary this year and held its annual developers conference just a couple of days ago. Now, they, in 2020, doubled the amount of revenue they generated through mini programs. And mini programs, just so you're aware, are the widgets which actually sit between the WeChat social platform and the e-commerce engine, which actually deliver the sales. So they really are sort of at the forefront of social commerce revolution. So they generated 250 billion in revenue last year as a result of social commerce, which actually put them ahead of another great social commerce platform in China, which is Pinduoduo, which has really just exploded onto the scene over the past 5 years. But social commerce isn't just the idea of selling over social platforms. Social commerce is all about the influence of social on the consumer journey as well. And this is where where we as communicators do play an important part. PR is traditionally sort of seen as the top end of the sales funnel, but we actually really do fundamentally underpin many more touch points in the consumer journey. And one of the great talking points around COVID and the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, is not just how we're coping today, but how we're going to recover in future. And every single organization, down to from the very, very top of the C-suite down to the individual employee, is looking towards recovery. And economic recovery is one of the biggest fundamentals of this, alongside the arrival of an effective vaccine. So what we can do as communicators is really bring value throughout the consumer journey, in terms of accelerating that consumer journey, helping building a brand, and help demonstrate all the purpose and the values and the equity that some of the previous speakers have actually been talking about, and making sure that that purchase decision is fundamentally underpinned, but not just by product efficacy or whether the product is trendy or not, but whether it does actually match the values of the consumer actually doing the purchasing. So we really can direct through both earned media, through social, through influencer, through owned web platforms. We can conduct and direct journeys through that consumer journey, whether it be to a marketplace, whether it be to an owned online e-commerce platform, or whether it indeed be a bricks and mortar store, or and back again to the online marketplace. So we are really orchestrators of that journey. I think that's going to be increasingly important in the year ahead.
Thank you, Sim. I mean, I really like, how you brought together a lot of the themes, from creativity and purpose to, helping to shape the consumer journey. And I think that's very important. I guess it all comes to change, and we've talked a lot about changes to the business and to the way we do PR, but it's also changed our personal lives. And Maria, I was wondering whether you could sort of comment on how PR professionals can actually stay afloat in this challenging time, and how they can cope with what is the status quo, the new normal.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. Yes, it can be very hard for us to maintain a positive and proactive outlook when we are faced with an unprecedented pandemic, as well as the outflowing daily work that we handle with our clients. But the more important thing is we have a choice. We have a choice on how we look at the different situation in front of us, and have a choice to changing our attitudes. While a lot of people us, PR professionals, could be bugged by the things that are happening in front of us, like for example, client deadlines, the different events that are being rescheduled or canceled or conducted in other methods. The more important way of thinking is to look beyond all that, beyond the current situation, and with a broad and look into it with a broader perspective, identifying opportunities around us and maintain a growth mindset. So at BCW, we always ask ourselves a question: what can we do differently? What is something that can be done differently? It's not right or wrong. It's things that can be done differently so that we could improve ourselves. We could find ways to enhance efficiency, drive value, and also grow our skills. And just now, Rachel asked a question about, so we are currently in a difficult situation. So how can we cope in a new normal for us PR professionals? So well-being has been a word that is has been a hot topic during COVID and during the pandemic. But as we focus our attention on the well-being of the people around us, let's not forget to look after ourselves as well, both personally and professionally. Because for PR professionals, the instinct that we have is our clients, our agency, our company, etc. It's all others first. But let's not forget ourselves. Let's look inward for ourselves as well. To enable us to stay afloat, we need to look further than our current skill set and experience. We need to identify ways to know more about ourselves, reinvent our personal brands and future-proof ourselves. This is extremely important because for some of us who started our careers like earlier, we have had experienced a lot of changes in the way we communicate, in the way things were being handled, in the way like media, we connect with media or we connect with the target audience. So there has been a lot of different changes. With this opportunity ahead of us, with COVID-19, there are a lot of different changes. We see like businesses transforming themselves. Are there any chances for us to transform ourselves as well? Are there any things or any skills that we can look into picking up, like learning a new skill, trying something new, have different exposure towards the communication program? So is there anything that we can do more for ourselves? And also like look into beyond what we are currently having. What is the one thing that you are most passionate about? And what is the one thing that you think will like be of interest to you for a longer period of time, or at least because you are passionate about that thing that you're looking at, you will have more interest or to grow it or to like change it into a bigger skill set that you have, something unique that you have. And one thing very important that we also need to ask ourselves is whether we are currently in a self-doubt situation. I know that for example, some of the companies or some agencies could be in a little bit more difficult situations or challenging positions. And but one thing that we need to remember is that if ever we find ourselves in our self-doubt like state, we need to ask our question: what if the opposite is true? Like you're self-doubting about yourselves, thinking that you're not enough. But what if the opposite is true? What if you're already doing very great? What are the other opportunities out there that we can capture? So this will be very important for us and to help us not only professionally, but also help our emotional health as well as our mental health. So for 2021, let's maintain a growth and open mindset and look out for opportunities to future-proof ourselves and bring value to our everyday life.
Very inspiring stuff. Thank you, Maria. I think the sort of issues that you've talked about in terms of mental health and how we're dealing with that is something that a lot of agencies are looking at. And I'd like to sort of ask Kiri now whether, Sinclair is what your approach to this is, particularly given you've got a lot of focus on working on in terms of mental health in the Hong Kong environment. What is the agency are you doing to ensure that your own people are resilient and able to cope with the new challenges that we're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Sinclair, our core value is team first. So I've always, as building the agency, put my colleagues before everything else, knowing that if I put them first, they'll then put their jobs first. And so the way I look at that is flexibility, agility, but also just being human. And I think that a lot of times companies forget to be human. It gets systematic or such, rather than just responding from the heart and with the core values of we care, we love, and we have kindness. How can we help? And so things that we've been doing, firstly, from the very beginning, we made work at the office optional, and we've done that throughout the year. We actually have 4 phases, which is fully work from home, office closed, optional work at the office, optional work at home, and then office is fully open. And it sounds a bit varied, but I think the team gets it now. I think they're all a bit trained in Curieism, so we're getting there. But the other thing is to really focus on a work-life balance, and work-life and well-being. Work-life balance and well-being has been huge talking points throughout this year, as it was last year. But I think what comes down to it is trust. If we can trust our colleagues, and when they say, you know what, I just can't do today, we don't have to ask questions. We just say, that's okay. I've got your back. And it comes from leadership, because there are some days that, like, Kiri can't do today. And I can say to my team, look, guys, I just can't do today. I'm exhausted. No worries, I've got your back. It's that showing that we have times that we come together. We've got groups of colleagues that are doing online exercising together. And so, you know, over Zoom, they exercise at home, but as a team. They haven't invited me yet, but then I'm a bit of a drill sergeant when it comes to that. So I totally get that. But I have been invited to, you know, cooking at home with colleagues. And this isn't our company organizing things. This is our colleagues creating things on behalf of other colleagues because we miss each other. And that's kind of the energy and team environment that I think can be created when there's trust, when there's authenticity, and when there is that flexibility to allow organically the team to create what they need, ask for what they need. But I do think there's another side to this, is that as an organization, Sinclair's always put about 10% in the last year, a lot more, of our time towards working pro bono for a good cause. And in the last year, so many of us have felt helpless. And so providing our team members the opportunity to be working for good makes them feel less helpless, makes them feel involved and empowered. Some of the things we've done is helping PRHK and their always on PR campaigns. Other things we've done is we've launched Art Power HK to help the arts community, for our arts team to feel like they're driving something forward. You know, there's a number of ways that we can also assist with volunteerism, where there's not a human touch point, but there's a back end touch point, and encouraging that, but also consulting for free to clients who are saying, I want to help and I don't know how. And our team will get on the phone and help. But I think that is just as important as being mindful of well-being and work-life balance. You know, and just a point that we had a conversation on a board meeting call recently about working hours and so forth. And one thing, and I can see from our attendees here that we have many clients that have joined us today, and thank you for joining us. But, you know, we had a conversation around how do we enable our team members to not reply to our clients after certain working hours when it's not urgent. And the reason that we empower them to do that is for the mental well-being of them, of you, our clients, and of all of us. And so thinking and making agreements with clients of when is it time to work? When is it time to turn off? When is it time to allow people within our joint teams and partnerships to focus on their family or focus on themselves? Because at the end of the day, we all know that that engages better work. And Rachel, thank you for asking that important question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of very neatly leads to, you know, a key objective of the PRHK this year, which is to really encourage our next gen leaders within the community to look at the whole area of being more productive, but doing it in a way that is good for everyone, good for clients, good for the PR community, and how can we as an industry really demonstrate best practices, but also look after ourselves, you know, create an environment where we're all looking after each other's back, and that will be a key initiative. I think that sort of leads us into, you know, what has employee communications per se, and how that has become a lot more important, not only within the PR industry, but with our clients as well. And Ben, I was wondering whether you could, you know, discuss what you're seeing in terms of clients looking more at employee communications as a way to become more purpose-led.
Yeah, so I mean, there's been I think last year really was the year of employee engagement. I mean, that's something that's really come to the fore, and I think we've seen organizations really step up, and I think they should be applauded for the work which they've done to really sort of stand on the side of their employees. And I think, as Kiri rightly pointed out, I mean, if you put people first, then they'll put you first as well, and they'll put the organization first. And they've recognized, you know, that people have had so many competing pressures on their time, you know, particularly for people who've got parents or live with their own parents and many people, particularly here in Hong Kong, who, have children or parents. So people, who have, children at home and also possibly living with their elderly parents as well, and are trying to keep a job going and are trying to do all of that in a 600 square foot flat. That is no mean challenge. I mean, we should not underestimate how much work people have taken in order to be able to get through that. But as we've always said, if we go back to the basis of PR and where we start and all the rest of it, it's always, grounded in the sense that your greatest advocates, your first advocates are your employees. And we've talked about this all the way through. They're always your primary stakeholder. If we're doing stakeholder maps, and I take myself back to being a junior account exec many, many years ago and doing my first stakeholder tables, it was always the first one which you listed. And this has really brought it to the fore. And what we're seeing is that, in terms of purpose and corporate responsibility and all the rest of it, those organizations which have stood by their employees are the ones who have again continue to thrive through this period, because their employees are helping them to do so and are talking out about the fact that they have done so as well. And those organizations who perhaps have been somewhat more mercenary in their behavior have not. And there is absolutely no doubt, as we look to this year ahead, the war for talent will continue. And it's going to continue in a big way here in Hong Kong. And this is a market which traditionally has been able to look outside of its borders and outside of its domestic talent pool in order to be able to fill roles across every single industry. The economy will grow. This period will change. This period will be over. Business will boom again. The stock market is already performing at highs which we haven't seen before, and Hong Kong will continue to reinvent. And those organisations which have stood beside their employees and shown that they want to do the right thing will be the ones who succeed in terms of attracting new talent to come and work for them, to take advantage of the opportunities which undoubtedly will present themselves over the coming months.
Mm. Talking about the war for talent, I mean, Sim, maybe you can have a look at this. What's changed in the life of a PR professional since this time last year, and what new skills will be needed in the future?
I can't remember whether I would have been doing this panel from home this time last year. That's certainly one thing. I don't know. I think what's fundamentally changed. I think some of the things that I think for myself personally, and speaking for my team, I think some of the same fundamentals that underpin everything that we actually do are actually still there. I think the motivate, the external, what's changed are the external factors which are driving the challenges around our clients. I mean, that's what I fundamentally see. I think, Kiri sort of explained, what it sort of takes to run an agency sort of right now, in terms of our role as employers, speaking to, what Ben's just spoken about. But, I kind of think that what's changing ourselves in terms of our day-to-day work per se is, I think is generally pretty much stayed fairly consistent. We're increasingly using technology. We're increasingly thinking across multiple channels. We're thinking about, utilizing, constituents hidden in plain sight in much more powerful ways. For example, like the employees that Ben was just talking about as well too. A lot of the things around the world actually changed this week with the election of President Biden. With the inauguration of President Biden just yesterday, something I think a lot of us are going to be fairly happy with. But we've yet to see what that is going to change or not change, as the case may be. I think many of us, both in the audience today and certainly around this panel, we're dealing with either directly or indirectly some of the decisions that were actually taking place outside of Hong Kong that have a big influence inside Hong Kong as well too, in addition to challenges, trends that are happening inside Hong Kong as well too. So as ever, we stay incredibly mindful, not just of what is happening close to us, but the things that are happening far away, which still have an influence on us as well too. We're living in a period of accelerated change in terms of technology and how that is actually impacting the decisions we actually make and whether they make it easier or harder to do. And we're also more mindful of ourselves and what motivates us and taking better care of ourselves as well too. So there's a lot of shifts which are happening there, which we have to take account of. But fundamentally, as communicators, I think we're already naturally pretty well attuned to some of those things that we should be looking out for, and that will remain a constant.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
actually, Sam, because I think that I do agree with you, but I think one of the shifts that we're seeing is digital skills are now absolutely essential. It's not a nice to have in a world where we're having to facilitate digital conference calls, where our clients are increasingly putting their money into digital activations because physical activations can't happen. What we're discovering is that every single person who works in this company has to have digital skills and has to be confident running a social or a digital campaign as running a traditional media campaign. Fortunately, you know, we have a bunch of digital natives, and it's not a huge stretch, but it is a shift, and I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah. Are we seeing other sort of innovations that are driving change? David, maybe you want to talk on this one. Any other innovations that are driving the change in skills needed?
No, not really. From what I mean, I do a lot of stuff online through Zoom. That's increased, obviously. And as to whether that will change, I don't know. I had my first face-to-face meeting on Monday this week in a year. And it was actually a new business meeting. And it was quite surprising, actually. I had trepidation about it. And I walked into the room, and the room was 7 or 8 people in the room. But the meeting went very well. And what you forget in all of this Zoom discussion is the nuances. I mean, so in that room, I was the only English speaker, but just the small things, the little jokes, the facial expressions on the eyes, all of that, I really miss all of that. And if I was presented with another face-to-face meeting again, so somebody said, go and do that next week, I would definitely go because I miss it. And just those little things is what's important. So although we talk about change and relying on Zoom and WeChat, whatever, the physical meetings are very important to me, and I don't think that's going to change. Certainly not for me. Maybe for other people it will, but I valued that meeting a lot. That was the first time in a year that I physically met somebody, and it was important.
Yeah, I mean that sort of physical versus virtual. I got asked a question by a client the other day who said, well, how do I really gauge the room? How do I see those nuances in virtual? How do I, react to that? And my comment was, well, it's difficult, but I'm sure that technology will evolve to enable us to do it. There'll be AI or there'll be, facial recognition software that will enable to give us that real-time feedback that we can't naturally see with our eyes at the moment because we're not attuned to that, we're not experienced at that. So I think that we're also in for exciting times where technology evolves in ways that we haven't comprehended before because of the situation. And it may be not in Hong Kong, but in places where the lockdown is real and they can't have the luxury of face-to-face. And so I think that that's going to be interesting to see, what impact that has and what we can learn from that, despite everyone's hankering for face-to-face. Felix, are you still on the line, Felix? Yes, you are. So a question for you. I know the year's been particularly challenging for smaller agencies and for smaller clients. And I was wondering whether you could give a perspective now on, ask the question around how have you kept your employees really motivated, and what are you seeing in terms of your clients do that as well? What are the things that you are seeing that are keeping people inspired to grow, inspired to make the most of this situation?
I think at the same time, current time, well, both of us and our clients, they are in a difficult time. I think what we try to do is we try to develop more closer relationship with the client while we have to provide more added value service and even ideas. We talk to them day to day and try to find out any way we can do any suggestion. Well, simply how to find a way out, because honestly, as a small company, and also look at the economy in Hong Kong, we don't see a lot of opportunity at this moment. Use that as an example. But what we can do is we try to explore every single opportunity with the client and see if give different advice, different suggestion, see if they want to do something different. Well, at the end of the day, some of the clients, they accept our suggestion and they are willing to do or to develop some new idea. I think it's good. So one thing is, it's also applied to our staff. We have to inspire our staff, even in a difficult time. Well, maybe they take low pay leave, maybe even I know some of the company, they have the salary cut, but if you want to keep the talent, you have to give them hope. You have to work with them, try to inspire them with different opportunities. I don't know, we work as a team. And they know the situation, they know the business are tough, they know the economy is not good. But what I'm doing is try to involve them in our decision process and also in all the brainstorm section. Let them know that, well, together we can break through this difficulties. Together we can make something happen. I think this is the time what I'm trying to do with my team and also the client. And I also know some of my friends, those pretty small business firm, PR firm in Hong Kong. They try to do, or the other way is to try to have a team up with different company, try to save costs and try to save time. Probably we can provide more flexible service and different options to our clients.
Great. Maria, a question from one of the panelists who is asking what our views are in terms of PR professional role in helping Hong Kong to boost the confidence in the city this year. And given the sort of unique political and social challenges, and she ends with saying, we love the city, so what can we do to help? What are some of the things that you would suggest here?
Well, for one thing that I have in mind is that perhaps we could look into how we can look out for each other. First of all, look out for opportunities to help out the community is something that we could look into. And as PR professionals, we do have a unique set of skills in terms of communications. Perhaps there could be some NGOs or there could be some organizations which need help or which need some support in terms of gathering more people, for example, volunteers to distribute food to the homeless people, or asking them if they need something when the weather is very cold, etc. So I think the first part will be, first of all, to start from the community. Look out for like people, for example, the racial minorities around in Hong Kong, like whether there could be some like infographics, local language infographics, or some easy to understand materials that we can help them to learn more about COVID-19, how to enhance their hygiene, etc., or anything that we can do to work with them to improve the situation, the living standard or the living situation that they are in. I think that this type of small steps, which not only agencies but also individuals can start with, can help build trust in the community, as well as build the communication platforms for all of us to communicate more together. So I think as a start, this could be small steps that we start, but of course in a bigger picture, there will be a lot of more discussions with broader community or broader like professionals, academics, etc. But as a start, I think we can start small, work out with the underprivileged, with the people who really needs help in this difficult situation in our city.
Great. And Sim, in terms of the digital, you know, there's an increase in the uptake of digital. Are you seeing an increased demand for more campaign metrics and communication ROI reports? and how are you also sort of upskilling your staff to be really digitally savvy? As Anushka was saying, everyone needs to be digital now. So how are you going about that?
Hi, thanks for that, Rachel. I did see those couple of questions come in. I'm happy to answer them. I do certainly agree with Anushka that that digital, an ability to plan, manage, activate, and execute through digital and social, it is changing from a specialism to to a must-have skills that really everybody needs to be able to have at least an understanding of. So it is something that we look to for everybody. Sometimes we do hire for deep specialism, and then we also train and upskill for more general sort of skills that people can actually apply. Let's not forget, though, that some people do not want to be a social media expert, and as an industry, we need, and our core is with earned media. And some staff, some people want to be experts in that. And we do have those within our organization as well too. So it's not necessarily something, it's not necessarily a cookie cutter approach that everybody has got to have exactly the same skill set. We need specialists in a variety of different aspects of the communication spectrum in 2021 and 2025 and in the years to come as well too. But there will still be those individuals, and there will always be that need for deep expertise in some of those disciplines, some of those aspects, and some of those disciplines that have been fundamental to our profession since the beginning of the last century. So that's not to downplay the importance of digital. Everything I spoke to with regards to social commerce requires an increasingly sophisticated talent set of skills. We need to be drawing from a much broader range of talent in order to be able to operate across those different kind of channels. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still need the things that this industry was founded upon as well too.
I think we've got time for one last quick question that I'm going to answer by proxy, so to speak. The question we've got from one participant, which is, what do we think of the future of live events? And so I'm going to ask each of the panelists to predict whether we're going to be doing this Trends event next year by Zoom or in person. So this is the prediction, in Zoom or in person. So go around the trap, starting with Felix. Zoom or in person?
Oh. I think Felix said Zoom.
Zoom. Okay. Zoom. Simeon.
I would also say Zoom as well for this particular format.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ben, Zoom or in person? I
think we're going to go in person, actually.
Okay. David.
Hopefully in person, because I like the nuances, as I said earlier.
Maria.
I'm a little bit greedy. I want to have both. Like we have a live audience as well as Zoom, where more people can take part.
Yeah.
Kiri.
Absolutely 100% in person. I'll put money on it, but I do like to encourage hybrid as well. If anyone wants to bet on that, I'm in for a Hong Kong dollar.
Okay, Anushka, you're lucky last, I think.
Definitely hybrid. It's the way forward with events, yeah.
Okay, well, I hope we answered that question. We've got a couple of other questions which we'll be happy to address at a later stage. Thank you all very much for participating. It was a very interesting discussion. Certainly purpose, trust, creativity are all high on the agenda. Digital was part and parcel of what we do and needs to be. We've got some people who are a bit more gloomy on the AI front, but certainly technology is here to stay and we need to embrace it and go forward. So thanks very much to everyone and look forward to this discussion next year.
Thank you, Rachel, for
hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.